In the millionaire's mansion, the maid froze in shock when she realized all the cameras were pointed only at her. Main characters: Aura Rogers, housemaid; Richard Parker, reclusive millionaire; Tammy Williamson, close friend; George, grounds keeper. Laura Rogers had been employed as a maid in Mr. Parker's grand estate for nearly a decade. In the crisp morning light, her tan sedan would roll up the sweeping driveway, leading to a house large enough to host charity galas, yet so rarely did. For 10 years, she had dusted, polished, and tidied every corner of that mansion. It was her routine, her steady job that paid the bills and helped support her mother in Ohio. One ordinary Tuesday, just after her lunch break, she walked down a corridor she seldom used. The corridor was tucked away behind the massive formal dining room, accessible only through a narrow passage hidden by ornate wallpaper. Usually locked, that door stood slightly ajar, exposing a strip of fluorescent light within. Curiosity tugged at her. She peered inside. At first, her eyes adjusted to the dim glow of multiple computer monitors. Then, her heart lurched. On the array of screens, she recognized her own figure in real time. Every single monitor showed her, standing there in the hallway, stepping into a bedroom to clean, picking up a feather duster in the main foyer, or walking across the expansive living room. She counted them. There had to be 24 monitors, each feeding a live video stream of her movements. No sign of Mr. Parker. No sign of anything else in the entire mansion. Just her, from different angles and distances. She watched in a mix of dread and confusion, scarcely believing her eyes. It felt as though the walls were closing in on her. Without a second thought, she backed out, breathing heavily, her pulse pounding in her ears. Every step she took away from that room felt like stepping out of a nightmare. Her mind spun. Why would Mr. Parker need so many cameras fixed solely on her? There were no cameras on the grounds, none in the other rooms, or if there were, they simply weren't displayed on those screens. It was her face, repeated over and over. In a daze, she fled to the staff restroom near the laundry area. Splashes of cold water on her cheeks did little to quell the rising panic. She pressed a trembling hand against the bathroom sink, struggling to steady her ragged breathing. After a few minutes, she somehow convinced herself to return to work, going about the rest of the day in a robotic haze. She couldn't risk causing a scene. She desperately needed this job. Yet her mind raced with a storm of questions. Was Mr. Parker watching her at that very moment? Was the entire mansion rigged just to observe her every move? That evening, she left earlier than usual, forging a quick excuse about a pressing personal matter. Her hands still shook on the steering wheel as she navigated away from that lonely estate. Once home, she collapsed onto her couch, mind still replaying the shocking images of all those screens. Early the next morning, Laura's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She half expected it to be Mr. Parker confronting her about snooping where she didn't belong, but it was her friend Tammy Williamson instead, the friend who had once recommended her for that cleaning job all those years ago. The moment Laura heard Tammy's cheerful voice, she felt an avalanche of relief. "Hey, Laura, you sound awful," Tammy remarked. "Everything okay?" Laura glanced around her small living room, double-checking that she was alone. "I need to talk to you," she confessed, her voice unsteady. "Can we meet for coffee?" They decided to meet at a small cafe near Tammy's workplace. Laura rushed out the door without even brushing her hair neatly. Upon arriving at the cafe, she spotted Tammy waving enthusiastically from a corner table. Tammy's face lit up with concern the moment Laura sank into the chair across from her. "You look like you haven't slept," Tammy said softly, reaching across to squeeze Laura's hand. Laura tried to steady herself. You won't believe what I found in Mr. Parker's house. Tammy leaned in. What is it? Laura lowered her voice, aware of the other patrons in the cafe. There's a room filled with monitors. All of them are pointed at me. I mean, literally just me. No one else is in the footage. Just me, going around doing my job. Tammy frowned, pushing her coffee aside. That's terrifying. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure, Laura said, exasperation layered over her fear. There must be 24 cameras. It's some sort of surveillance system exclusively focused on me. I don't know what to do, Tammy. I need that job. I can't just quit without finding something else. Tammy toyed with the hem of her blouse as she mulled it over. Well, maybe he's just worried about security. Maybe there's a logical explanation. Laura shook her head vehemently. If he was worried about security, wouldn't he have the cameras on the doors, the windows, or the valuables in the house? This is different. It's like he's obsessed with watching me. Then you should talk to him, Tammy suggested gently. You have a right to ask. You've been working there for 10 years. The mere thought of confronting Mr. Parker made Laura's stomach churn. He's always been polite, but he's very reclusive. I don't even see him all that often. And now this. The idea of bringing it up scares me. Over the next hour, the two women considered every angle. If Laura confronted Mr. Parker, she risked losing her job or incurring his anger. Yet she couldn't ignore the suffocating paranoia that had settled in her chest like a weight. By the time Laura returned home, she hadn't made a clear decision. She resolved to lay low, see if anything changed, and possibly look for another position without immediately raising suspicion. But the next day when she arrived at the mansion, the tension in the air felt palpable. She could hardly concentrate on dusting the display cabinets or vacuuming the plush carpets. Every time she turned a corner, she felt unseen eyes tracking her footsteps. The entire mansion seemed different now that she knew those cameras were there. She spotted Mr. Parker just once that day, crossing paths with him in a narrow corridor. He offered a brief nod, his expression solemn as always. But was there a flicker of something else in his gaze? Relief or curiosity? Laura's heart hammered, and she could barely stammer out, "Good afternoon, Mr. Parker," before he vanished into his study, leaving her with her swirling anxiety. Days slipped by in torturous slowness. The knowledge of those cameras ate at Laura. She found herself constantly glancing over her shoulder, struggling to maintain a pretense of normalcy. One afternoon, as she was dusting the library shelves, her mind replayed an all-too-familiar scene. The banks of monitors, her own image in each feed, the hush of that hidden room. A sudden burst of determination lit up her chest. She had to know why. Fear or no fear, she had to return to that room. Fortune favored her. She discovered Mr. Parker had left for a meeting, as indicated by the note he often posted near the front door whenever he went out for business. Gathering every ounce of courage, she quietly hurried toward that corridor. This time, she did not find the door ajar. It was locked. But she remembered how the door had looked slightly damaged, as if the lock or frame was a bit off-kilter. Her hands trembled as she tested the knob. The door gave after a moment, clicking open. Inside, the monitors bathed the small area in a cold, artificial glow. Once again, she was confronted with her own face staring back at her in real time. Each flickering screen traced her every breath and movement from different corners of the mansion. She forced her gaze away, scanning for any sign of a file, a diary, or a stash of documents that might reveal Mr. Parker's intentions. Her heart hammered like a drum as she rifled through drawers, careful not to disturb anything too obviously. Eventually, she noticed a small wooden box perched on a top shelf. She tiptoed onto a chair to reach it. The box wasn't locked. Inside, she found a few old photographs. The first shot was black and white, capturing a younger Richard Parker smiling in front of a vintage convertible. Another photograph showed him standing next to a beautiful young woman with dark hair and a radiant grin. Instinct told Laura this must have been his wife. She thumbed through more images until she found a single snapshot that sent chills through her body. This woman looked alarmingly like Laura herself. The resemblance was uncanny. The shape of the face, the brown eyes, even the dark hair parted to one side. On the back of the photo, a short phrase was scrawled in elegant cursive. "I love you." Laura's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the photograph, her mind racing. Could it be a coincidence? The woman was presumably Mr. Parker's wife, and she looked almost exactly like Laura. That explained the cameras, perhaps, the fixation, the need to observe. A wave of revulsion and fear rippled through her. In that moment, she heard a faint scuffling sound in the hallway. Panicking, she shoved the photographs back into the box and returned it to the shelf with trembling haste. Seconds later, the doorknob rattled, and she darted away from the monitors, pressing herself into the darkest corner of the small room. She prayed that whoever was trying the door would move on. The doorknob jiggled again, but this time the person let out a frustrated sigh. She recognized the voice. George, the longtime groundskeeper. "Must be locked," he muttered. "I'll check back later." Relief nearly overwhelmed her, and Laura seized the chance to slip out. She left the room just as quietly as she had entered and hurried back to her duties, her pulse still racing. By the time she reached the foyer, she felt an odd mixture of dread and understanding. Mr. Parker was stalking her, not out of random malice, but because she was the spitting image of his deceased wife. In the following days, Laura's nerves were stretched to the limit. Now that she understood the root of Mr. Parker's behavior, she could hardly bring herself to continue working there. Each time she entered a room, she was acutely aware of lenses capturing her every gesture. Despite the utter discomfort, she tried to act normal. Financial stability was important to her. However, as the days wore on, a creeping terror grew. What if Mr. Parker's obsession deepened? Would he start expecting her to behave like his late wife, to wear the same clothes, speak to him with endearment, or fill the haunting absence in his life? 2 weeks after her shocking discovery, she was in the mansion's grand foyer, vacuuming the marble floors when Mr. Parker approached from behind. "Laura," he said in a subdued tone. She turned the vacuum off, swallowing a lump in her throat before responding. "Yes, Mr. Parker?" He paused, glancing at the windows where the afternoon sun filtered through heavy drapes. Something in his eyes wavered. How has your day been?" The question was simple enough, but the vulnerability in his voice unsettled her. She tried to answer politely. "It's going fine, sir." He nodded, offering her a strained smile. I appreciate how well you take care of this place." And with that, he retreated to his study before she could formulate a response. She realized that conversation, brief as it was, had felt more personal than any they'd had in 10 years. He'd always been polite but distant. Now, an earnest longing clung to his words, making her shiver. That night, she lay awake in bed, replaying every detail of the encounter. A part of her pitied him. Losing a spouse was a tragedy few recover from easily. But another part of her felt cornered, fearing what his growing fixation could lead to. The emptiness of her own home offered no comfort. She pictured those monitors, imagining the possibility that Mr. Parker could also have a system that reached beyond the mansion's walls. The thought alone set her heart racing. Eventually, the choice became clear. She couldn't remain under constant surveillance, overshadowed by the spirit of a dead woman she resembled. The next morning, she typed up a polite resignation letter, printed it, and brought it with her to the mansion. She didn't want to cause a scene, but she also believed she owed Mr. Parker a face-to-face explanation. Stepping into his study, she found him at his desk. He seemed lost in thought, staring at nothing in particular. When he saw her, he straightened and offered a gentle, almost hopeful look. I came to give you this," she began, her voice trembling slightly. She handed him the resignation letter, folded neatly in a white envelope. He broke the seal carefully and read, his expression darkening. "Why are you leaving? If there's anything you need, more pay, different hours, just tell me." She swallowed. "It's not about that. You've always been generous, but I can't stay here anymore. I'm sorry." He searched her gaze, desperation flickering in his eyes. "Laura," he said quietly, His voice caught, and he pressed his lips together to stifle a surge of emotion. I respect your decision." Tears threatened to blur her vision. She felt compassion for him, though her fear remained. "Thank you for everything you've done for me, Mr. Parker. I truly wish you the best." Without waiting for another word, she retreated. Her footsteps echoed in the silent hallway, each step feeling heavier. She collected her few personal items from the maid's quarters in the back of the mansion and left for good, half expecting to be called back by his voice. But no call came. By nightfall, she was at home, unemployed but freer than she'd felt in weeks. The first few days after her resignation were punctuated by nightmares. In these dreams, she walked through endless corridors lined with monitors showing only her face. She would wake drenched in sweat. Yet, she also felt a glimmer of relief, no longer obligated to return to that lonely estate overlooking the city. She managed to secure some freelance cleaning jobs around her neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but enough to keep the bills at bay. One day, as she was finishing up at a client's apartment in Santa Monica, Tammy called. "Laura," Tammy said, sounding distraught. "I just heard something terrible. It's about Mr. Parker." The news crashed over Laura like a tidal wave. Mr. Parker had committed suicide. She sank onto the apartment's worn sofa, her face paling. "When?" she whispered. "Last night," Tammy replied gently. "I heard it from George, the groundskeeper. The police came to the mansion this morning. He was found in his study. Apparently he left a note, but the details haven't been released." Laura's mind whirled. Guilt clenched her heart like a vice. She recalled their final exchange, his trembling words when she submitted her resignation. She wondered if he'd felt that losing her was like losing his wife all over again, a final blow to his fragile psyche. For the next several days, she moved through life as if in a fog, haunted by the memory of those monitors. Sometimes, she pictured the photograph of Mr. Parker's late wife with that heartfelt inscription, "I love you." If she had stayed, might she have saved him somehow, provided solace or friendship that could have steered him from despair? Then again, if she had stayed, would his obsession have escalated? The questions gnawed at her with no hope of an answer. A week passed, and word reached her that the estate was locked down, the future of Mr. Parker's fortune uncertain. She found no relief in the knowledge. On a somber Tuesday, she drove to the gates of the mansion. She didn't go inside. She simply stood by her car, gazing at the imposing structure that once contained her entire working life. Memories of vacuuming those hallways, polishing grand chandeliers, and discovering that hidden room filled her thoughts. Most of all, she remembered the lonely figure of Mr. Parker, a man consumed by grief, who had sought a pale echo of the love he'd lost. The staff had all been dismissed. George told her quietly that no funeral service had been announced yet. She felt a lump in her throat, but couldn't bring herself to linger. The place loomed over her like an abandoned fortress, reminders of sorrow in every stone. That night, as she lay in bed, Laura closed her eyes and tried to remember Mr. Parker as he'd been in the early days, distant yet courteous, appreciative of her work, generous with her wages. She tried to recall him as a normal employer, not as the broken soul who had turned his entire surveillance system on her. The guilt, though, wouldn't fully vanish. She could only hope that his tormented spirit had found peace, and that she might eventually find peace too, knowing that his haunting watchfulness was finally at rest. In time, she came to a sort of acceptance. She'd done what she had to do. Whether it was right or wrong, she had to leave for her own mental well-being. The tragedy of Mr. Parker's demise was not solely her burden to bear. He had made the choice to lock his grief away behind closed doors. His inability to cope had led him down a dark path, and though Laura resembled the wife he lost, she could never truly replace her. Epilogue. Life moved on in the quiet suburban neighborhoods of Los Angeles. The Parker Mansion remained a silent monument of wealth and sorrow, its future uncertain, its windows forever shuttered. Over time, rumors and stories circulated, some claiming that Mr. Parker left everything to unknown relatives, others insisting that he left cryptic instructions for the estate to be sold. But for Laura, the real estate gossip hardly mattered. She carried the memory of that place in her heart, both a haunting, cautionary tale and a reminder of human fragility. Sometimes she'd have flashbacks of seeing herself on all those monitors, but she also remembered the faint, fleeting kindness in Mr. Parker's eyes, the desperate hope he had carried. Whenever she felt the sting of regret, she reminded herself that she was not his salvation. No one could have replaced the love he lost. She continued cleaning homes, eventually finding a new position at a small law firm in downtown LA. The staff there was friendly, and the environment lacked the overbearing gloom she had experienced at the mansion. She found new friends, new routines, and gradually, she laughed more often. Life went on in its inexorable flow. Yet every so often, when the wind howled late at night or a shadow shifted at the corner of her vision, her mind would drift back to that fateful day in the surveillance room. She'd recall the horror that chilled her blood upon realizing that someone was obsessively watching her, day in and day out. In those moments, she would whisper a quiet prayer for the troubled soul who had been consumed by his own ghosts. Though the news of Mr. Parker's death spread quietly, overshadowed by the city's ceaseless hustle, for Laura, it was a profound heartbreak she'd never fully shake off. Even as she found her footing in a new chapter of her life, she held a subdued empathy for the man whose sorrow had driven him to extremes, and ultimately, to his tragic end. And in this way, a certain equilibrium returned to her life. She did not dwell on the what-ifs forever, but neither did she forget them. Instead, she carried forward the realization that compassion has its limits, and that sometimes, no matter how much you might want to help, a person trapped by their own anguish can only be set free by their own will. This is the story of Laura Rogers and the millionaire Richard Parker, proof that every life holds depths we cannot see, and that sometimes people's desperate needs remain hidden until it's too late. If you found this tale compelling, Do remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more real-life stories that will leave you reflecting on the complexities of the human heart.